So aduna koi hausalasiko. So objective. This unit will take a comprehensive look at current trends in popular literature, which is constituted by a vast number of literary genres. This body of writing is inherently dynamic in nature as it constantly responds to social, cultural, political, and economic changes. At the same time, several transformations are influenced by changes in production, distribution, and consumption of literary texts. Oh, no. Masigi unit se ko. Sida akwai khara kupna comprehensive oina ko haibadi loina touch tawra ka haibitare current trends in popular literature haibadi kari kamaina tawri kari phibam da lerige haibitare popular literature haibadi moigi role in society bu hairage ne ko society da akwai readers da haibitare akwai popular haibitare ko popular oina leribra moise popular literature hairage ko akwai moise zeitgeist hairage ko akwai social zeitgeist da karamba role lori mogi impact se aduki matik chawbra pikpra haiba myam da ko ying duine ko auna this body of writing is inherently dynamic in nature haibadi dynamic ko bahar ka static oi da bahar bani haibadi karin haba kanda makan makan oi biya ba yanda ko auna kari no haba kanda akhoi gi early 2010s hairagene ko sida akhoi kari uba phangge haba kanda American society ko ni yenga siko haibadi ha ki oina ko maduda akhoi na American production haikadra films kumba haikadra young adult kumba haikadra ko adu mada popular literature young adult ki genre ji yamna matamdu da yamna mayamna pamnei haibitare ko adu pamna bana maram oiraga novel sing do kuigi divergent series kind of level ko nu taram magani na kalawi they di Hunger Games ko they di the kari the Maze Runner haibra kaino adu suguma mayam je popular literature chingye ko aduna moise akhoi dystopian society da based to ba ko akhoi society se hujing matam da yamna degrade tore khole na akhoi consensus ama lei mayam na ko ai badi society jam pirum social poverty ki chang hengale odidi class difference have da ne ko akhoi the rich and the poor haikatra the have and the have nots ka have the ko economics haraga ko ani du ki marakta aduki mate gap haiba tare amasung barrier jo harage ko ama lerapto madu do akhoi writer singna madugi ethos haiba tare ko madu capture tawraga moina akhoi Mockingbird Hunger Games harage sorry Mockingbird and Hunger Games ki novel ang maming ko series ke the Hunger Games the Maze Runner the Divergent atopa ju yam ko atopa haidi ke hetare less relevant oi haiba tare ain haijina khara hena important oi ki haiba tare ko akhoi movie adaptation go phangiba yamna popular gi haidi blockbuster go oi ki harage aduna akhoi yamna dynamic oi habse summi begin haiba kanda akhoi popular literature je kadi dagi respond to no haiba kanda social cultural political and economic changes and the society amagi akhoi cultural political financial adu mamyam je akhoi writers sing na moina mogi first hand experience ko madu uraga moi ichorak panina akhoi popular literature je society ki heartbeat to kun touch to kun me kind of hai ko adu why to sinare ko at the same time several transformations are influenced by changes in production, distribution, and consumption of literary texts. Transformation karana amu kari na impact okay haba kanda production gi mong, distribution gi mong, amasung kamaina consume to no haba consume to bahar gadi novel amu or gadi like ki mong consume to re ko to the novel do mo adapt or movie mo or gadi akoi gi film gi type consume to makan yam nei aduna akoi popular literature je hoji ki oina moje kari position da lady and simple in higher but the was a kari impact lady society the kari society ki ethos to capture to become society ki zeitgeist to mana loksun mangam bra have to ngasi ki lectures that koi ne naraga understand to minara ni ba aduna masini ngasi ki objective koi ki lectures ki ko introduction da laksi ko Introduction. With advances in technology, modes of publishing and readership have also shifted, resulting in iconic changes in the very nature of text. Considering all these factors, this unit will look at some key developments in the field of popular literature, both in terms of its thematic thrust of literary works and the formal mechanics of representation and distribution of text. Technology as a concept, publishing ki mong, readership ki mong, kinare or hong have a CD, accept of the have the example of Pirage. Koi Gutenberg magi printing press, Gutenberg's Bible Garga, printing the Ogi Horin or Koi adu among the China the kind of you will focus in her block printing that is also acceptable. But nowadays, we most of publishing makan yam we digital have we paperback haraga makan yam hana accessible the advancement in technology or technology advance or readership ki chance अतुकी मते हेंगल है बता याद है को क्योंकि मतलब मम्मा द लाइक सिंग जे हार्ड कवर को द लेदर बाउंड को द मोगी only the elite of society दुगी elite भाई बदी सापाई बा लाइक है को है effort ओबु नंबर reading है बसे मतलब मम्मा द दी क्योंकि novel गुम कई गुम हार के को क्योंकि hobby की तब खलम बदी ना क्योंकि bored people सिंग द थोइंग की reading द or novel गुम ले बदा पैसा थादा बा है बसे याम ना completely sungay late have the yar ko but adu yamna rarity ne lor ko adu hojin matam dadi koi ki kindle kind of star money the paperback the galere aduna hana matam amada yamna costly or like sing hojin matam yamna cheap oire yamna accessible oire aduna ayamna achow ahung ma ko lae amasung text ki nature da jo ahung ma lae ko aduna considering all these factors masigi ne sin khardun ha kan key developments kari developments lake popular literature hari fills it up ko atuga thematic thrust ki matang da literary work ko habadi kari themes ko magai matang da laki habada ko atuga formal mechanics of representation atu combine represent okay and distribution of text ko tu brief history of popular literature. Conventional to dismiss popular literature as being formulaic in nature. Prejudice existed as early as 19th century. When Matthew Arnold established binary between popular and culture in his book titled Culture and Anarchy. Culture and Anarchy hariba text ko aikoigi Matthew Arnold binary haragadi difference habatako one and the other habi moniko popular habaga culture mangi culture and anarchy habala da mana differentiate tawiko aduna popular haragadi aikoigi kamai habatare khara standard name ba culture haran khara wangba to hanga lonar me aduna matam amata aikoigi popular literature yamna formulaic oi habadi amaga yamna manai top magun chende ko magi quality je yamna kahta late khote habi mong ha ta ne ko aduna prejudice am lera me ba adu kai no ba kanda matang dugi afawa critic kumba kai kumba moina zu akhuigi dismiss to bi ba ha ta ko me jwa no moina zu ode ja top critic sing na zu akhuigi england da zu ko afawa critic sing na popular literature kumba jina society gi decade na mateng pangi kai na ka habdi moi gi kama ha ta elitism ha ta ko akhuigi culture the classic things in one but hakta thamba popular literature romance kumba kai kumba ko we new writers ni ra bujida ani amba thakta thamba adugi chana bi ma kuina uba phangi aduna akhuigi apaw critics well respected habatari ko well respected critics na adumaina inara banina akhuigi kari habatare issue ma lai habatare ko aduna popular culture gi marta choba divide amako popular niamba culture no wang haibado etuar no wigumba for critics na support or mina or propagate to bunina ha sando bunina kui society na ju popular literature have say kra anim thakam even though it was considered yamna popular or popular in the sense that moise yamna widely read or mogi quality se yamna leitaba haibata ne ko example am pire ke I will bring another medium busalake ba kui Oscar hariba or Academy Awards haribase akhoi mayamna loinama khangdaraba ngaktaneba ko aduna Academy Awards kumbase sum yengo ko no Academy Awards kumba kaimba karamba movie da pigan ge haba kanda drama gumba deiti kai tare historical fiction gumba kaigumba adugumba ayamba pigale ko dramatic oba haba tare deiti ku superhero movies haragene ko example ni ko superhero movies kumba deiti horror movie kumba naga best film gi kai tare award phangba haibase almost impossible ne hai almost impossible ko aduna sumaina aikoigi Academy Award na hojik matamda film gi genre marakta awang anem khaiba dumaina matam dugi critics singna popular literature ga classics ka gi marakta ju differentiate toron matani ko Arnold blamed popular literature for social decay in London to hojik aina haiba to ko gi English society ko London da kaida society mangdharakpa mutharakpa da kaitare popular literature na achoba thoda am lowe kaina ka mana ka blame to while cultural works written by canonical authors like Milton and Shakespeare deemed capable of educating masses aduga magi opinion da ko mana awang ba thak tham bhai ba tare ko aduna Shakespeare gumba William Shakespeare gumba ko odai John Milton gumba kai gumba moin iramba text sing se paragana society bu chingkhatpada thawdang lowi aduga akhoi popular literature gumba jina London haragin or English society harage ko as a whole English society da yamna society se decay to pa haide pathar pa kundra haibani or in this case akhoi society se phibam social pa mangsal pa harage ko adugumba da popular literature ji magi maran lei kaina kamana ga blame do thambi ko aduga Milton gumba Shakespeare gumba classics gumba haibe tare ko akhoi yamna high brow literature ko moine and important hoena critics including like Matthew Arnold gumba thazei ko Theodore Adorno believed popular culture governed by logic of profitability and lost sense of artistic autonomy. Aduna Theodore Adorno haiba critics na jo popular literature haiba sidi paisa tan ba yate ko profitability gumba do mai onjalakpa aduga artistic autonomy haragati writer amana mana iningba iba autonomy haragati ko magi mathata kana talita ba haiba tare ko in this context magi freedom haiba tare freedom to express oneself size laksale na lowe man aduna Theodore Adorno hoy odai Matthew Arnold hoina popular literature je awang thakta thamamde ko this led him to declare that products of popular culture strengthen existing status quo and numb masses into cultural social and political submission aduna Adorno na hai akhoi popular literature na status quo hargadi magi state of being haibani ko lairami ba mong do aduda dum lehali aduga akhoi masses have the praja mayam jibu nam oenba aduga cultural social and political submission haragadi moida kaitare fit spoon feeding dorga ko moije wakan hongandaba or moije dum yan ba haiba tare submit to ban ba haiba to ko akhoi matam dugi culture matam dugi society matam dugi politics to dum accept to ba revolt to hondaba haiba tare ne aduna Matthew Arnold hoy Theodore Adorno hoina popular literature je khara anemba thakta hairage ko compared to classical literature harage ko moina dum place torame matuni ko Formulaic nature of popular fiction like detective fiction made them ideal for structuralist study. Popular literature, seen as body of writing, which reflects deeper undercurrents of society. Change came with emergence of postmodernism, which challenged division between high and low forms of art. Now, akhoi popular fiction jidi detective fiction gumba haiba tare ko madudi yamna formulaic haragadi like amaka detective fiction like ahum mari le khalajine ko moigi starting middle amasung and the climax haigadra moigi revelation gumba haigadra moije loinamak structure yam manaba amagi type to pinu ko I would obviously case ama lagani natra crime ama haiba tare ne ko crime ama commit torani victim am layerni perpetrator haibam layerni the detective tuna magi analytical skill magi deductive reasoning gumba sinaraga solution am puraga last ta criminal lo phaba dunya aduna si detective fiction gi text khudimakta si gi patterns adum upawang ebo mena ko aduna formulaic oi habeto moina chumi obinina structuralist in study to bakanta yamna irai line understand to ngam ko madudi popular literature seen as body of writing which reflects deeper undercurrents of society na popular literature na writing makalamani karama writing makalamano deeper undercurrents of society zigi reflection hai di society zigi mirror amo oiba ngamba style amani loiba aduga ohum kai la ke ba kanda karam kanda lai change came with emergence of postmodernism and postmodernism have the lak the gidi society da ohum ba lai or akoigi post popular fiction da ko akoigi popular fiction gi understanding da ahum ba malai ko kai la ka ba kanda which challenge division between high and low forms of art na postmodernist sing nadi masigi text na or masigi novel masigi works na high form of art amani masina low form of art amani na distinguish tawte ko muna challenge to wi madu gi to haibadi art is art having mong to the one has ko the high low classical popular having concept to the equina definition pibani akhui sana bijabani aduna bibam thokte na lakni na odagi di popular literature jam ken popular way post modernist period and haibata ko genre fiction which was relegated to margins of literary writing assumed center stage the age of distinction between serious forms of literature on one hand and mass produced on the other hand begins to collapse towards the end of the 20th century. Oh, no. 20th century loiramdaidadi yamna kuina matam kuina leirak aba haibani ko age hole haragade distinction khenaba ko serious forms of literature ni sina classical ni sina serious ni nakana na thamba ma aduga atopam dana apigi mass produce to ba mayam ni dam mass produce haragadi karigi mass produce sibu karigi namakta low form of haigatra the non serious form of literature ni hari kagi noi ba kanda justify ta okay ko larik to masai na jo haikre akoigi printing gumba kai gumba printing gumba ki nascent stage hai bata ko ngalingai ki stage tadi printed works into yamna tangi ko yamna affordable oiba ngamde of the only gi landed lords gumba nobility gumba ko moi gumba dan afford to ngame ba aduna society ze even now hai bata ko laira baga pesa pai baga nyam kanda laira bana masing heli natra now then way back then ko any time period in bakanda aduna aikoigi popular literature gumba kai gumba jiti ihong hong ba sam ba quality like the paper gumba da kai gumba da print oraga ko example in haige ko aikoigi England da leramba kari penny dreadfuls kind of like makhan liko sugumba makhan singse yamna accessible oiba yamna hongba makhan gi rai oibani na somda aikoigi serious form of literature higher than classical gumba kai gumba atang ba like to dunia ko aduga somda mass produce na on the other hand I say mass produce na popular literature doini because affordable way mass produce oiba ngami ji kai na ba kanda che hongba quality name ba ko aduga somda serious form of literature higher than serious text ama the example in high ko 10 pounds people from the mass produce the 10 pound like to yang kai gum lai bia dunia ko aduna adisi market divide ama dilera me adubu madugi divide to 20th century lo shalam dai tadi madugi divide have to lay a khitre yanda ko sina high quality ni sina low quality ni ga higher ga yang judgmental obagi concept to kairak pa ho this phenomenon get impetus importance to field of popular literature which witnessed major phase of growth towards the end of the 20th century popular literature da yamna achauba wave am la growth ki ko maduni newer forms of writing emerged while certain traditional ones were redefined to fit needs of the present generation now writing ki form ano ko haibadi yamna formulaic oram do oiraktre haibani manchi haining is aduga traditional ones akugi hana adune formulaic oram basing na redefine toraga akugi readers singi sentiment yang ga haibata ko popular literature ki yamna problem na readers sing na popular haise ko maming chapa na ju define toraga di ko mayamna pamgado mo iraktuine ko ona handaki wave amako for example in 2010 early side ko early 2010 sadai da dystopian gumba kai gumba young adult gumba ji yamna popular wi ko hojina mu kari ore ka kana comic book sing jung ore habidi because of ki noi joloi khanga duni Marvel DC na tra ki comic book movies mem like na hojik se comic book ki wave ong line lo ya ko the graphic novels matam du gi oina ekhuigi writers sing na masses sing na paning da to masses sing na enjoy to the like say tailor made toraga iba hore baduna present generation jina karamba type of text paning haibadi matamam da kuigi early 2000s na kuigi Harry Potter gi ko kuigi wave to yamna to kimati kan gra haibetare nang daga ahing daga moigi book release ka dungai na ko tuna mayum ba hanni kauduna kuigi dukan da dum phamaga pa ki bai ko ki wari ga kuigi yamna angang wari gi ko taraki auna present generation duga sanana ba kona writing style jo kugi popular literature da kui uba ngam hore ba maduni ko mathang slide tong ngaksi visual turn in popular literature. Last few decades witnessed rise of visual forms of storytelling. Graphic novels have been occasionally. Scott McCloud defines comic form as juxtapose pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence. Una juxtapose yanjan naraga ko pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence of the Latin ko left to right habitate wiki Western or Indian style ko. Aduna comics kumba graphic novels kumba kay kumba se wiki last few decades and hujikta mamang zu hiram ko yamna popularized ore habadi may yamna para nina ko. The fact that the term comic was still in need of concrete definition as late as 1993 hints towards relative novelty as a recognized academic discipline. Oh, no. Comic habisi karino. Comic habisi bu kamaina define the way kari bu comic nena locani kari bu comic nena categorized only habisa. Concrete definition je 1993 atai bu da leram deva. Aduna. Masina haning is kaino 1993 is the only 32 years ago higher again ko charop nako so he kuntra ni tum tangai ko have a few decades tangai ri ko na comic kumba ga yum the novelty no ba have ta ko relatively newer akoi som da side ama da na akoi Shakespeare hoi Chaucer hoi Milton hoi ko nakanam da classical gi du lege nakanam da na akoi new forms of popular literature la ko the visual gi side la ko na gi comic have na matu gi form do to ne ko na comic have di am na kui yes published the woody comic se 1950s, even 1940s, but definition of piba as well as academic line the pusalaga serious study toba or serious weight piraga analyze toba hobusidi naranga ngai ri mo yende ko comic have forms ko madulita. McCloud attempts to trace formal history of medium. He goes back to a pre-Columbian picture manuscript discovered in 1519. Around 500 years ago, and a 230-foot long tapestry detailing Norman conquest as possible antecedent. Oh, now, kamaina karibu comic ni karina comic na te comic mana badi na define to bani have some lu bani na ko mani ang kana Norman conquest ko England ni Norman conquest moina tapestry the p da have ko turaga ko gi scenes land gi scenes mo gi Norman conquest ki scenes sing do turaga ilai do su comic ni lo ya ko tra ba su a form of comic nan lo gatra ko gatra haina kugi definition to define to no bo ne ko na comic ki mamang comic mak tin na trego do ko comic ki predecessor have tare adu company na lo The Yellow Kid, created by Richard F. Outcault, regarded as first of such comic strip. The comic strip the Yellow Kid is called by Richard F. Outcault. I have the parjna yamba haragina ko comic strip na lo. This was followed by emergence of the comic book in the 1930s. Yes, instead of the 1950s, 1950s ki mamang da have ko 1930s adai degi di comics makan lakpa hore ko dui matung da ni ki juhana taram mani ko the golden age ko silver age bronze age kind of la ni ko comics in jawna matam dui comic ko ki karmaming mun haraga na ko ki Batman gumba matra Superman gumba comics in jaw jing matam da di moi ki first issue go do lai gi haraga di probably nowadays $2-3 million ka PB aur ko adun da padi akoi popular literature ki values hengale have di adum chumba ta bane ko matam du da 1 cent 2 cent 5 cents piram do ko bujing matam da di collectibles so gale aduna popular literature ki growth se akoi ki praja myam ki have tare masses ki acceptance na akoi ki potu ki value hengale have to di that is true achum bane ko Beginning of golden age of golden age of comic books is in 1938 with debut of Superman and the Superman action comics if I'm not mistaken in action comics aina moigi comic ki brand habatare ko amalebani the Superman je introduced to Superman hariba comics to native action comics number 1 or ko I'm not sure or 1 first issue or Two American comic book companies merged to create what is now famously known as DC Comics. DC Comics haragati. Kitang harang beko sida eki expert area niko. Batman gumba, Green Lantern gumba ko ain haiba ming memse The Flash ko Superman. Moi memse DC Comics ki intellectual property ne IP have that ko. Comic book company ani na punja naraga DC Comics 하리세 ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯐꯣꯡꯈꯤꯕꯅꯦꯕ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ DC Comicsꯇꯅꯦꯕ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯍꯧꯖꯤꯛ ꯁꯨꯄꯔꯃꯦꯟ, ꯕꯦꯠꯃꯦꯟ, ꯋꯟꯗꯔ ꯋꯨꯃꯟ ꯀꯣ ꯑꯗꯩꯗꯤ ꯃꯌꯥꯝ ꯑꯃ ꯂꯩꯈ꯭ꯔꯦꯀꯣ ꯖꯁꯇꯤꯁ ꯂꯤꯒ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯗꯀꯣ ꯃꯌꯥꯝꯁꯦ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ DC Comicsꯇ ꯌꯥꯎꯔꯛꯇꯣꯏꯅꯦꯕ Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in 1938 ꯑꯗꯨꯅ Superman ꯁꯦ ꯀꯅꯥꯅ ꯀ꯭ꯔꯤꯌꯦꯠ ꯇꯧꯈꯤꯕꯅꯣ Jerry Siegel ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯤꯕ ꯅꯨꯄꯥꯗꯨꯒ Joe Shuster ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯤꯕ ꯅꯨꯄꯥꯁꯤꯒꯤ ꯃꯕꯥꯅꯤꯅ ꯀ꯭ꯔꯤꯌꯦꯠ ꯇꯧꯃꯤꯟꯅꯈꯤꯕꯅꯦꯕ Superman born on Krypton and sent to Earth in spaceship just before home planet destroyed. Now, Superman is quite hangi ko. Anak tazu 2025 niko. Obviously, Superman ki movie ma release with Superman ko ko tare. Yamna fazai. Noiju yenga mani nakali. Aduda magi Fortress of Solitude ka haido magi mayum haiba tare ko ice Antarctica dara Arctic dara ma sa ko. Aduda mana lakpa kanda magi mamaga mapagagi recording do ko buram kani ko na ko movie to di yang magadi aw da ma se spaceship amda magi Krypton haiba planet se kai dore mai planet destroy to bidore ko aduna ma se hingong no bainam the last son of Krypton hai to ko ma se mai mama pa scientist tu na masana pa se kaloragadi na kalaga ma se spaceship amda hapaka yellow sun leiba planet amada tharak bani aduda labu phatna haiba tare ne ko earth da ma thung bani ko aduga ma se khungangi John and Martha Kent, or Jonathan, yes, Jonathan and Martha Kent na mabanina spaceship to Tenaraga, Moigi Machagum na Maji Yoki Badagi, Truth, Justice, and the American Way, Haito to the Gilaki Baneba, American couple, Yamna kind and loving American couple Lamana, Superman, Hypertine, or Kal-El or Clark Kent, my means we am young record. Tenga Badagi, Mayopi Badagi, Maze. America ki kungang amda ko maze exact kungang dudi ka orako awda maze sorokani ko aduga maze superhero habdo ugibane because he was raised with love and care and this sense of good and bad habdo kangang buto ko mo everyone he developed superhuman strength and abilities is ema kamai phon ko ha kanda numit exposure phon budi ko earth ki yellow sun je mana absorb toroga magi special powers me mana create to ngame ko and his foster parents advised him to use his abilities to serve humanity and hujik ta haibatu ko magi power du na magi powers haibata na ko popular literature comics lak ni ko mayam gi mateng pang mayam gi seva to ko lo na mong da pasana tapi budagi ma se hero hi bane na tragedy villain or bu ko and he becomes a crime fighter yes man metropolis lak no ko na Delhi planet there kaino ma thaba ko reporter ma thaba dor ko laga magi alter ego haibata ko magi human identity na Clark Kent aduga magi superhero identity Superman and mana from any threat habitat ne ko Lex Luthor the Brainiac the Metallo yam like ko nu men nu chen kang mani fight toroga mayam ju mana protect no ne adunita he creates alter ego to protect secret he changes into a costume and becomes Superman and the mana costume nu chen magi S ko yaw it's not an S it stands for hope kind of have to my thingaram gani ko Henry Cavill ki Superman yaw on the Superman hai persona je mana magi costume do hongdoga mana grand fight to da magi persona do ne Superman jina ko magi real name haidra Kal-El magi earth name na Clark Kent ko masi myam je khoi comic book kum da khoi golden age ha je Superman introduction de gi lak ne lawe ko na world gi most famous superheroes are the ohum hayo har ga obviously Superman Batman amasung Spider-Man and highway na traffic show ngasi haidre sorry handak chahi na Superman gi movie release tore mathang chahira natraga I think mathang chahi or dum ma ko surely oitra Spider-Man am release orani adugi mathung na Batman gi movie ngai haibadi akoi gi culturally yamna significant ori na lobi yare badoi ko moi se haibadi yam liraba chahi chama su gro characters antone ba adubu they are still relevant today and they call na Superman abudi hali second Batman or ngani ko chronologically lakpa kanta aduga last na Spider-Man or Spider-Man adu asi consider ka ta Stanley the creator ni ko Stanley bilai ki tra first big budget Superman film starred Christopher Reeves legi da ba kuidri ko maze Superman movie mari ra kya no kumam ni ko part mari adu ne ta aduga maze Superman the Quest for Peace Superman 2 ka har ga yamna matam du da yamna popular ho ki ba haibati iconic oi ki ba character mo Christopher Reeves sai ko na Christopher Reeves sai be actors in the Superman sagi madunita the kind of success that Superman comics and films receive spawn new industry new genre of characters with secret identities already Superman ki comics sing je popular or panina to superhero sing je mo launch to ba hore ba aduga mo je secret identities leiba superhuman capabilities leiba powers and colorful outfits na drama outfits in game usually primary colors na to red black yellow green whatever dum ma'am auna Superman की success है genre defining ओरप genre defining or as well as genre लान है तारे को genre तो कालगा तो genre तो जो successful ओरप ngam superhero comics सिंजे or superhero है genre को or comic books है के को ऐसा वो यामना relevant ओइबा society याम relevant ओइबा मियामना पामना बा popular literature की part में थोकरे मतुनित. So we had Batman, Wonder Woman, Plastic Man, Green Lantern, and Flash among superheroes who followed footsteps of Superman. Oh, na Superman na popular or patagidi matang superhero man like Batman like Wonder Woman like Plastic Man, Green Lantern. Si may amjalo naman DC Comics nga to niko matunid. Sales of comic books increased during World War II as they were cost effective. Inspired patriotism and depicted good triumphing over evil. Oh, na comic books sing je yon bigi chang je World War II manung da yan hen hingale ko kay the mo hong cost effective way ko hai the sense amani people dang ni patriotism hai the American patriotism do yamna moina influence to or inspired to aduga and depicted kari utke good triumphing over evil apabana phattabu mai thiba or mai thiba bi ba have se comic book ki hero gi magi Mathau amane ba natra na akoi comics in the Batman na boiro Wonder Woman boiro any male female superhero whatever moina mogi enemy hagadra mogi evil counterpart har ke mogi villains into defeat toraga to save the day ga habato ko adu myam do yamna maram ama kogi World War II matam da kogi morale hangat pagi maram ama mogi pro American characters became popular. And the Superman is pro-American happy icon. The Captain America Captain America wore stars and stripes as costume. Na American flag to the gi henna. Yamna obvious ho reko Captain America gi costume je kari ne inspired ho given to. The American flag to stars and stripes are. From its first publication to Avengers movie series, popularity of Marvel Comics and Captain America well documented modern popular literary history. Oh no. Captain America gi first publication. Oh the gi horaga Avengers movie called the Captain America. So we're all popularity of Marvel Comics and Captain America yamna well documented on the have a record of comic genre yamna popular oipa character ma genre moire as well as film gil higher time copy movie category to we Avengers kumba kai kumba Captain America ki ma standalone movies me on So, sinebo popular literature da visually kari ahum balake habakan comics la ko ne ko tanis. The decades of 1940s and 1950s marked by widespread protests against macabre and gory content of comic books. These protests were conducted by groups of educationalists, journalists, and psychologists who raised concern about the graphic description of violence and sexually provocative content in comics. Already, comic tazu ahong ba malakadore ko aduga kari ahong bono haiba kanda 1940s amasung 50s ta comic books in je athing ba haiba tare ko thingna gi lobby tor ba ma we thing neba America da kai ko kari gi no haiba kanda macabre amasung gory macabre ka dealing with that asiba haiba di comic identity hero duga villain duga fight to ni ko to ni na tra fight to ni na gi blood kumba kai kumba injury kumba asiba the dead bodies kumba yek ko pa je angang sing the lan na haiba tare usually we comic book pa ba je ambana young adult kumba as well as small children na tra pa ba ni na moida psychologically negatively impact to BI habagi concern ama lakudagi di comic books in je thingna ba ko aduga monitor tongna ba ama wave ama laku ure ba ko atunita ana these protests were conducted by groups of educationalists, journalists, and psychologists. Ona educationalists kara, journalists kara, also psychologists kara na moigi moina palm da do habatare ko moina phatte na khan basing moina raise torokne ba who raise concerns about the graphic description. Graphic har ka diam obvious ko violence and sexually provocative content in comics. And to me, a nupi figure, nupi form, yamna scantily clad over dress, sela kolaka, comic yekbase yamna common way. Even now also common way. Adubu matamduda 1940s and the 50s idea less illuminated time harage ko adu wa do sinarge adu wa ido aduna matamduda thingna bu hona gi adubu maduge gensa Comic Code Authority formed in 1954 aimed at regulating contents of comic. Aduna Comic Code Authority se 1954 form tore aduga moina amu kari no mathusina kari no haiba kanda comic amada kari hapi kari hap be kari lothop ai haiba to moina moise apugi censor board ko mane na khalo ko film da kaita kuina all the cinema da yeng zat pakanda film da holding da ko apugi India da ni ko India gi da hairage Indian censor board na masi film je universal U haragan universal A haragan adult ko de moi amna rating system am people ni ko universal haragan mi kudi magna angang an loi mag ni yarwi yengya ba movie mo ine ka haraga moina grading pi kan ni ko adumaina sigi comic code authority 1954 da form do jina comic ta kari hapi ai kari utopia have to gi moina deciding body have ta ko moina board organization do idore underground comics movement emerged in response to censorship imposed by comic code authority. Comic artists created content related to themes like drug use, violence, etc., which were expressly forbidden by prevailing comic code. Adubu underground comic movement naman dila ko. Habidi comic code authority ki rules and regulations follow to ba habita ne ko. Mo against a rebel to ma uba pange aduga moina drug use kumba violence kumba kay kumba matang da comic yekpa iba hore ko matunita. In the choice of their unconventional subject matter and satirical mode of expression, comics movement let down groundwork for graphic novel. Already, sida moina unconventional subject matter have the superhero ke gadangi na tabo makan subject matter ato to pasi na ba hore aduga satirical mode of expression satire sinner padagi di comics singja ana angang gini superhero dangi ni khalam bata odagi evoke to ra ga haibitare ko akhoi graphic novel ki form amlo to graphic novel sa ga akhoi example ma thar ai ko mouse kind of art spiegelman ki mouse or the persepolis kind of am like ko yamna famous oi ba yam irrelevant oi ba graphic novels me am ja comic tagi moi ki beginning se akhoi na trace to ya ko maduni in 1978 Will Eisner's A Contract with God was marketed as a graphic novel, the first recognized use of term 1978 the Will Eisner ki lyric A Contract with God is actually ihan hanba graphic novel ne na recognized to be ko madu one. It refers to complete story told in one go in comic form as opposed to a comic strip which is periodical in nature. Auna kamaini kena bono haiba kanda graphic novels all graphic novels ko almost all harake all have the land ni ko almost all graphic novels in self-contained story me yaw haibadi hobadagi lo yaw ko aduna tabida akhoi comic books sing di periodical haibadi every week every month every 6 months whatever may be the case ko usually every month have a every month dingi issue mo pong ko hojing matam jo adugi pattern sa nari ko issue number 1 2 3 4 masai jun hagi the superman issue 1 je hojing yon ge or like ge harakati $2 to $3 million guys irala na pangani ko good quality or ga ko quality to jam depend budi tawi aduna graphic novel the moiti self contained story ma matom na yauje ko madunita graphic novel usually associated with more serious and sophisticated thematic concerns unlike comic strips which were meant for consumption by children or teenagers sida jo muk different kena bam jar graphic novels sing jidi kara serious amasung sophisticated thematic concerns jaw haibadi subject matter do kara serious obi geleba aduga akhoi comic strips sing jina amu angang singna or teenagers singna ayam bani enjoy to bani yelak bani ko awna kena baje ahan ba kena bana graphic novel the complete story yawali aduga comic book tadi akhoi periodical gali ani shubana graphic novel gi tadi magi theme haiba tare subject matter je serious amasung sophisticated oi aduga comics ani amu akhoi angang singna panaba or young adults teenagers no mana panaba oi ko di wani. The genre tried to redeem comics from accusations of moral depravity and carve respectable place within literary circles and society at large. Today, graphic novel is a well-recognized literary category, both within academic circles and within the commercial marketplace. Now, masigi genre jena katoba pangi have kanta. Comic sina hana lower miber role je yamna agang sagi ni da ka have mo de ko have angang gi lai ni teenagers sing gi lai ni na yamna lumna lognaram da ba. Wigi graphic novels na madugi opinion do hongna phonari ba ko na literary circle si marakta or society da comic book na ta ba wigi graphic novels sing je wigi yam important ba amasung relevant or themes su yam express to equally have to get acceptance la ba hore ba auna academic circle da amasung commercial marketplace da mo gi role je chokale aduna important obi hele ha next slide chiko comic medium associated with juvenile entertainment comic ai angang ko juvenile ai angang gi entertainment ka bayam primary ne its subject been limited to fantastical worlds ko utopia roi da ba ai bi pai ben comic dai une pai ba power pai ba ko pana cartoon characters superheroes mi amse ko they were essentially a flight from reality and reality thinking ato thoi to ko ne ba adone akoi superhero comics ne tori na tra car ang thangat pa train ka kham ko pa pai ba odi power pai ba me am da reality de gi la ko na to ko. It was with Art Spiegelman's Mouse and Marjan Satrapi's Persepolis that comic medium employed for depicting serious subject matter. Already, Art Spiegelman ki yamna famous most celebrated work Mouse ka aduga Marjan Satrapi ki Persepolis ki di comic medium or graphic novel ki medium ja serious matter gumba ki depict to su yana do kang pune. Graphic mode of storytelling become fundamental form of representation and comic medium itself has grown by leaps and bounds. Hilary Jude argues that graphic narrative is more appropriate term for his body of writing, which uses visual medium to tell stories. So, one have the Hilary Huina have the normal graphic narrative have the relevant and some of the graphic novel the key can have. Besides Spiegelman's Mouse, which received Pulitzer Prize, graphic narratives have received critical acclaim, including Joe Sacco's Palestine, Alan Moore's Watchmen. Spiegelman ki Mouse lere Pulitzer Prize ka phangri ko haibadi yamna important oiba literary award amani ko aduga kuji Joe Sacco ki Palestine, Alan Moore ki Watchmen hoju graphic novel nen lobi aduga muiju yamna readers in haibada ko yamna awang bu thak high level da thame ko both in terms of quality and thematic content haibada ko. It was understood as subset of children's literature, young adult literature. Traditionally, representation of children symptomatic of prevailing conceptions of childhood. Childhood is socially constructed category and its representation fall under certain preordained tropes. Children as innocent, angelic creatures, children as vulnerable beings in need of adult protection. Philip Aries demonstrated how attitudes to children have changed over time, thereby creating category of childhood category. Children matam kharagi mamang hundreds of years ago khara hairage mamang childhood se kamaina define to your children kamaina define to or children je karino habuga hojik matam ki children je kamaina define to have as we evolve as a society Aries argues that in medieval society, as soon as a child could live without the consent solicitude of his mother, his nanny, or his cradle rocker, he belonged to adult society. Medieval society mama especially mama dun ex and under to yar matam hek yoguda the ma adult society ki member in law. Anybody under the age of let's say 18 wina juvenile chingi or adult natin law. According to Aries, attitudes regarding childhood, child rearing, and families changed decisively in 16th century with emergence of capitalism. Aries ki matung ina diko, magi Philip Aries ki matung ina di angang yok child rearing haga diko. The childhood ki matam aduka family gumpase definition je karam kandi ko ke ba kanda 16th century dai degi yamna hanale miba madi mamang da le aduka madi matung da la definition je ka acho khena bam la capitalism na maramura. Diana Gittins argues that childhood, rather than a real state of being, is more of an adult construction that in fact disguises multitude of contradictory memories, desires, and myths. Kincaid argues child becomes a vacant category that may be a repository of cultural needs or fear not adequately disposed of elsewhere. Childhood have a combined defined the way real state of being in Mahutta, adult na construct over entity construction of money. Whether the contradictory memories are we desire some myths are we not Diana Gittins magi definition. Around 20th century, Critics establish difference between childhood and adolescence. Adolescence ka childhood ki market difference हम लागू है. According to Karen Coates, the term adolescence comes from the Latin word adolescere, which means to mature or become established. On a childhood ka adolescence ka je hanadi same category da have tare ko khalam do ojikti childhood na separate amasung distinct of category ama adolescence are jina mu masagi different amasung distinct category ama ne na acceptable hawe. They offer imaginative release and fulfillment through fantasy and indoctrinate social and cultural norms. Several dominant social and literary narratives, including Bildungsroman, invest a lot of faith in the idea of a natural growth of children. And Bildungsroman, Charles Dickens, novel or hero protagonist to give mana magi chahi lo hai tare ko magi his whole life have tare ko adugi magi progress to give the Bildungsroman ko for example ma hire the maybe Great Expectations have Oliver Twist ko adu me ando de America the hire the Mark Twain iramba Huckleberry Finn ko adu me ando le ba adu Maureen Daly's 17th Summer, often recognized as first novel written exclusively for teenagers. Maureen Daly ki magi like 17th Summer hai se ko sina ihan han ba teenagers kidang da focus over children na tabo teenagers in the focus over young adult literature is broad spectrum of writing that includes iconic works like Harry Potter, Hunger Games, etc. Harry Potter gumba early 2000s Harry Potter even late 1990s at I don't know how number published over the early 2000s po hire aduga Hunger Games kumsina wiki 2010s at while young adult literature concerns itself with life of teenage protagonists, readership can vary across the ages. Young adult literature in the heroes or protagonists ayambana angang di nataba anju nataba marak to teenagers kumba ayam boidali ko Hunger Games ki boiro Harry Potter ki boiro Maze Runner ki boiro mo ko adubu akoigi pa badi dum every age angang an young adults in the loina mo enjoy to wi no na pai. Ed's bracket of readership, significant marker of defining young adult literature. Busman and Haas define it literature for and about adolescence, while Stevens argues that if it's a story that tackles the difficult and oftentimes adult issues that arise during an adolescent journey towards identity. Young adult literature is usually written as realistic fiction, historical fiction, realistic fiction, mystery, it simultaneously reinforces and challenges status quo, matamdugi status quo, have the current set of being challenged to reinforce it in multiple social fields like gender, class, race, etc. Hunger Games, gender, for example, Hunger Games ki protagonist say female ni and Divergent ki jo duna role sumum lo biko na hana leramba status quo have hero protagonist hire in the pan of the have kuina classical thought to challenge to digital text and popular literature. The interaction of technology and literature results in paradigm shifts in terms of production, distribution, and consumption of works of literature. Technology it is possible to distribute and read literature via internet, phone, laptop, tablet, or through specialized devices or platforms, and Kindle. This has produced new styles of writing like internet blogs where individuals regularly upload content belonging to broad range of writing. So blogging to website, I give thoughts in share to anybody can read it. I give website to give HTTP I give web page to give address to I give thoughts enjoy to one can argue that it has democratized this space in hitherto unknown ways and made it popular in the true sense of the word. Now, popular way everybody has access to it now. 19th century, 20th century, 18th century, the popular literature have a definition. Housing Matangi popular literature can popular way. It is now possible for any individual to find an audience for the literary creations online. Some of the most iconic books of popular literature in recent past were in fact self-published, including 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James, which was originally featured as a piece of fan fiction. Publisher printing internet ki mateng lawraga haiba tare ko san da self publish to bi are adu blogging gumba kai gumba da blog ama iraga mayam na ban bi are constituted by that are digital born, that is, first generation digital objects created on computer and meant to be read on a computer. Electronic literature is a rich body of writing and further divided into categories like hypertext fiction, which is characterized by linking structures, and interactive fiction. Interactive fiction, what is that? When a character role, the Loroga, decision as the story moves along, we like the protagonist journey do passively akwina follow do Harry Potter has Harry Potter ki journey do akwina change to bi ade magi destiny magi ko writer do na J.K. Rowling irami ba mong dum follow to ba but interactive fiction da di decision je left and or right chat pa up or down chat pa ko we pamba da di character amaga aiga relationship sagat pa natraga atopam sagat pa ka lo yare buji. The sharing economy of internet has facilitated formation of a strong body of fan fiction, usually defined as a fiction based on a situation and characters originally created by someone else. This kind of fiction created by impassioned readers, and it combines different media. On example, I'm Star Wars has Star Wars character like Star Trek on Star Wars natural Star Trek the over characters sing mogi fans sing ko moyu pamjaba moibu enjoy to mi sing namu moina adugi characters sing the sinaraga moina mu writing sumba kai mo publish to hore madu bo fan fiction ko madu. Fan fiction blurs boundary between author and reader as text becomes live entity, constantly being reworked and revised. And the character to rework to revise to for example, George Lucas na Star Wars create to na Han Solo Han Solo character George Lucas kidang fans myam na fans myam la Han Solo sinarga fiction is a Han Solo what in the defeat or fan no what to defeat on the Gender politics and popular literature. Popular literature played a significant role in establishing and questioning societal gender norms. Literature of the 21st century reflected paradigm shifts that have taken place with regards to gender and sexuality. One subgenre of popular literature known as chick-lit features single women in 20s or 30s living in urban metropolis and managing demands of career and personal relationship. Chick-lit literature popular in the early 20s kumba 30s kumba metropolis lerga mogi work life balance ka to like taxing or novelsing sa yam du popular chick-lit a huge departure from more traditional representation of women deals with passivity and domesticity ona hanadi nupi singje moje kamaina ut ke haba kanda yana passive oiba yana domestic oiba habi yum de ma pan thok taba khot taba ko career kai ga gi concern kem le jada boi uram ba chick-lit tadi akoi gi career driven oiba mogi personal relationship balance no hona ba rush amada ga leba ko demands me anu in bit to hona to ureba. In chick-lit, female characters are independent and they simultaneously seek romantic relationship. As with several other forms of popular genre fiction, chick-lit is derided as formulaic, trashy literature. Now, chick-lit karana critics karana formulaic way have the amaga yam na mani trashy way kind of derided karana pami popularly oi, but it's not considered to be high class literature have that. Helen Fielding's Bridget Jones' Diary and HBO's Sex and the City regarded as precursors of genre. Precursors are novels categorized as chick-lit are characterized by a certain sense of intimacy and candor because of the use of the diary form of writing. Itorapakanda diary ki mong habidi mogi akoina paro ito mong mogi secrets kumo Instead of championing women's cause and fighting for equality, chick-lit invested in portraying real struggles faced by women in this day and age. Honestly, writings portray This is resonant of post-feminism, defined as a sensibility constituted by a number of interrelated themes concerning gender relations. And gender relations, themes raised some of the they reflect lives of modern day women, the anxieties and conflicts faced by her. Modern day women domesticated in the sense that more passive masagi decision masagi wants likes and dislikes ko mayam express to ngamba masana earn to masana spend to moina faced over anxieties and conflicts chick-lit yam fazana portrait to. While majority of criticism has centered on literary merit on yung the chick-lit novels it is perhaps productive to study them as reflections of gender politics of contemporary age. Academically yung literary merit mayam literary moise gender politics hojik matam gi gender politics kum yeng ba kan da moigi struggle ko office ama daga join to office ama thabak to ne pising jina balance no hona myam cha adugi perspective ta gi study to di kanai have matumi ko instead of championing women's cause and fighting for equality cause is a Chiglip invested in portraying real struggles faced by women in this day and age on hojik matam gi real struggle getting to work on time example amu in hire ba ko deadline ama mit tawna bona ba thabak to nang na su myam chine ba tra hojikan gi challenges hire ga ko pi ama gi di masagi career prospect kum bati ko pa promotion kum all those things right the mo romantic kum pursue to no maside it strives to portray authenticity of female experience while raising issues about sexuality identity etc on female experience yamna real oina fake oida bida yamna gilded oida bida harage na ko why to see na rage floral language sin na bida harage real life nupi amana everyday life ta moina thingnariba awaba moina thingnariba challenges ko office goer amagi or professional woman amagi have tare ko mugi challenges ayuk na tawala ga breakfast semba tabuk nang no kona ba odai romantic relationship or other personal relationships in to grow to no kona ba odai di mugi career growth mo na sim yam join the person ulle ba ko to gi bon na checklist se yam na popular ba hore Bridget Jones' Diary guys yamna cultural phenomenon amoigi as well as HBO gi Sex and the City guys ta gi nupi mari gi bari ni ko Samantha the ka ID something in ko but yamna popular ba nupi sing su yamna pamba TV series na habitare ko na mo je chingye let us sum up popular literature defined in terms of mass appeal and commercial success. On popular literature, the combined defined to have a kanda mayam na pamba mass appeal haragati ko commercial success level. Habadi mayam bishajo na tan profitable or habadi ko mass when produce of yam na parani na bisayam talani copy mayam yolong ko. Owing to relationship with market forces, ethos of this form of writing is always influenced by contemporary socio-cultural phenomena. So na masigi form of writing za popular literature za matamdugi socio-cultural phenomena na dum impact to bani ko comics have given way to full-length graphic novels comic tagi graphic novel have the lucky bani ko comics in a precursor ni graphic novels na successor ni have while on the other hand new media technology has given rise to new forms of representation altogether like blogs microfiction etc already apoi technology la patagi di blogs kuma tole microfiction tole fan fiction tole na tra na apoi author dung na control itre Contemporary popular literature is characterized by an increased degree of audience participation as culture of fandom has made its way into production practices. Fan fiction audience na participate by the same popular literature. As common people vocalize their opinion with vigor, popular literature acknowledges its lack of diversity, making way for a rich spectrum of representation of marginalities of all kinds. Margin the thamba topic or themes or subject matter or mayamze we popular literature the center state to push up on the mebo na mugi lack of diversity ke kaleram base ko common people na vocalize tor pakanta I represent over Latino hierarchy Latino Asian black whatever mayam goina popular literature da represent irailan to pungami tawju tawi aduna akogi marginalized sections of society marginalized group of people ja moise represent to phange we have been represented have to moina finally follow ngame maduni ko so nasigi lecture da ikoi popular literature in the modern times harke ko right now harke ko na contemporary popular literature je kamain tawi contemporary popular literature je akogi kari haba tare media makan hong ko comic books film myamom linare ko so this swaida ngasigi unit 4 ki lecture lochalaji aduga next class ta ikoi topic amala khalaga amuk linearji ko so I hope you have all understood the lecture delivered today if you have any doubts we will continue in the next class Oh,